Pull up a chair, family, and lock the door behind you, because what just detonated inside the corporate spine of the music business is not a rap beef, it is not a diss record, and it is not a subliminal Instagram caption thrown from a balcony in Miami. What just happened is a full-blown execution, tailored in a bespoke suit, signed across a mahogany boardroom table, and stamped in red ink over the entire ledger of modern hip-hop. By the time this breakdown is finished, every executive in every glass tower from Manhattan to Miami, from Atlanta to Los Angeles, from London to Toronto, is quietly closing their office door tonight and canceling their weekend plans. Because Curtis, 50 Cent, Jackson did not simply fire another shot at Rick Ross. He constructed a machine engineered to consume careers whole. And Rick Ross, wearing his own bespoke suit, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, with the whole culture watching in ultra-high definition, walked directly into the mouth of it. Wait a beat, because I already hear the objection forming in your mouth. You are about to tell me this is the same tired feud, the same 2008 Officer Ricky nonsense, the same two grown men who should have shaken hands and moved on a decade ago. I hear the argument. But understand this, and I am saying it loud enough that the folks in the back row feel it in their chest. The 50 Cent who came for Rick Ross in 2008 no longer exists. That man was a rapper. The 50 Cent standing over Rick Ross' industry-wide carcass in the summer of 2026 is not a rapper. He is a media mogul with distribution contracts stitched into his name at Netflix, Starz, Lionsgate, and inside multiple international content marketplaces. He sits on the speed dial of executives who could not name 3 Rick Ross singles for a signing bonus. He sits in production meetings where the phrase unit economics gets used more often than the phrase Hot 16. And the man he just corporately dismantled is not the same Rick Ross who dropped Trilla or Deeper Than Rap either. That Rick Ross had label backing, radio, a chart, a Def Jam war chest, and a culture willing to bend around him. The Rick Ross bleeding on the boardroom floor right now is a legacy artist sitting on a first-week album under 2,000 pure copies, a tour running under 20% capacity, and brace yourself for this one, a debt portfolio quietly acquired by his oldest enemy. I have the paper trail. I have the venue reports. I have the corporate filings sitting on my desk as we speak. Stay locked in, because what surfaced in a Florida corporate registry filing at 5:45 Eastern this afternoon rewrites the entire map of who actually owns hip-hop. And it did it without a single new verse being recorded. Not one. Not a bar. Not a hook. Just a filing fee, a notary stamp, and a corporate attorney with a black felt-tip pen. Let me set the stage properly, because if you do not understand how the ground shifted under Rick Ross' feet, none of what follows will hit you the way it should. Deeply strange things have been happening around Maybach Music Group for the last 90 days, and nobody in the mainstream music press connected the dots until tonight. Rick Ross rolled out his 12th studio album with the swagger of a man who still believed he was 15 years younger. He built the entire campaign around a global orchestra tour, hardwood arenas, dinner jacket branding, private jet flex reels shot in slow motion at golden hour. Ross positioned the release as his imperial return, his coronation, the moment he reminded the culture who wore the crown. And for approximately 72 hours, the mythology held. Then the first week numbers leaked. Under 2,000 pure sales. You read that correctly. Under 2,000. A man who once moved 180,000 units out of the gate is now moving fewer physical units than a suburban SoundCloud artist with a viral 15-second clip. And that number leaking into the internet was not the disaster. That number leaking into one very specific executive inbox, the inbox at G-Unit Film and Television, that was the disaster. Because Curtis Jackson has been sitting on a specific file for 17 years, waiting for exactly the set of coordinates the universe just handed him on a silver tray. You feel me? Because this is where the general public keeps getting it wrong. Most people think 50 Cent is petty. He is not petty. He is patient. And that distinction is the one Rick Ross missed for a decade and a half. Curtis Jackson has been quietly stacking leverage in the dark. Rick Ross has been publicly stacking jet keys on Instagram. When the venue reports started rolling in, arenas booked at 19, 20, 22% capacity, front row sections being papered with buy one get one half off promo codes routed through third-party discount aggregators. Curtis Jackson did not laugh out loud. Curtis Jackson closed his laptop, walked into a legal meeting on the top floor of his production offices, and issued a single instruction. Not a diss track. Not a meme. An instruction. And in that instruction, the entire music industry landscape started rerouting around Rick Ross the way a river routes around a stone. Because Curtis Jackson does not need to beat Rick Ross on a song anymore. Curtis Jackson has been in the business of buying floors, the floor you stand on, the floor you walk on, the floor you sign contracts on. When you own the floor, the man standing on it is already inventory. He is already an asset line item on somebody else's balance sheet. He simply has not been informed yet. Here is where the ground turned. On Tuesday morning, before most executives had finished their first espresso, a series of confidential legal notices went out from Curtis Jackson's corporate counsel to the boards of 3 major distribution networks, 2 international venue conglomerates, and 1 dominant streaming platform. The letters were not threats. The letters were reminders. Reminders that G-Unit Film and Television's multi-year, multi-title production pipeline, a pipeline currently underwriting a significant portion of the premium cable and streaming ecosystem, could be reevaluated in the event these same partners continued to distribute, promote, host, or otherwise amplify Rick Ross' catalog and touring calendar. Read that sentence again, slowly, because the phrasing is doing more surgical work than any diss track ever could. Curtis Jackson did not ask them to drop Rick Ross. Curtis Jackson asked them to choose. And when you are a boardroom sitting on a 9-figure content pipeline with Curtis Jackson standing on one side of the scale and a 2001st week album standing on the other, that is not a math problem. That is a formality. There is not one executive in that building willing to bleed for Rick Ross tour dates at the cost of their own production slate. Not one. Not on a Tuesday. Not on any day. Let me pull back the curtain on what happened next, because the speed of the collapse is the story here. By 10 in the morning that same day, an internal memo leaked out of a major international venue booking agency. 3 arena dates on Rick Ross' European and domestic tour route were placed on administrative hold pending, and I am quoting the memo verbatim, a full operational and financial risk assessment. Venue underwriters cited insufficient advanced ticket velocity and elevated operational liability, which is the polite corporate way of saying, we are not eating a loss on a man Curtis Jackson has just informally blacklisted. The dominoes did not stagger. The dominoes fell simultaneously. Streaming playlist placements began quietly disappearing from Rick Ross' new album by lunchtime. Programming executives stopped returning calls. Radio spins locked in for the weekend went suddenly unlocked. Sync deals in active negotiation went stone cold. By 2 in the afternoon Eastern, William Leonard Roberts too had transitioned from headliner to industry contagion. From a name on a marquee to a risk flag on a spreadsheet. From a brand to a cautionary line item highlighted in yellow on next Monday's risk review deck. That is not spin. That is the timeline. That is what 6 hours of Curtis Jackson's accumulated corporate leverage looked like when it finally hit the open marketplace. Curtis Jackson then took his victory lap on camera. He does that. He always does that. This time the lap was cinematic. A single photograph, Curtis Jackson seated at the head of a long mahogany conference table, 6 executives in tailored suits arrayed on either side of him, a leather portfolio open in front of him, 1 fountain pen resting on the top page like a punctuation mark. Caption underneath, 7 words, I told y'all I was cleaning house. Then the follow-up post, 30 seconds later. Nobody is booking the fake boss. Labels don't want him. Venues don't want him. The bots got flagged. Pack it in, Ricky. The ride is over. Feel the surgical precision of that word choice for a second. Not the ride is done. Not the ride is finished. The ride is over. Present tense. Declared. Final. Curtis Jackson was not predicting Rick Ross' collapse. Curtis Jackson was narrating it in real time. And the culture, the same culture that watched Rick Ross wear the biggest boss title for 15 years, did not defend him. It piled on. Hard. Because the optics were catastrophic. For a decade and a half, Rick Ross told us he ran boardrooms. In one afternoon, Curtis Jackson demonstrated who was actually walking into them, sitting down at the head of the table and pulling the door closed behind him. That is not a diss. That is a demotion. And emotions do not get undone by a diss track. Let me take you inside the promised land estate in Georgia, because what happened inside those gates over the next several hours is the human core of this whole story. Sources close to Maybach Music Group describe a scene bordering on organizational panic. The road manager was on one line. The distribution rep was on another line. Event promoters in 5 different states were on hold across 3 separate phones. The catering vendor for the European leg was asking whether to process refunds. The insurance carrier on the tour bond was demanding updated capacity projections in writing before the end of business Eastern. And in the middle of all of it, Rick Ross himself, silk robe, cigar, cell phone in one hand, laptop balanced on the other, trying to hold the mythology together while the mythology was actively being repossessed behind his back. Ross did what Ross has always done. He went live. He hit Instagram, chin up, jaw set, camera framed exactly right, and delivered a rant that in any other decade would have gone iconic. He accused Curtis Jackson of running to white executives to shut down black art. He accused Curtis Jackson of using dirty Hollywood tactics because Curtis Jackson could not touch him on wax. He called Curtis Jackson an informant in a suit, a line that in a different decade would have detonated across the culture. But this decade did not care. This decade watched a man in a silk robe defend an empire that was already being liquidated in the next room. That is a hard visual to walk back from. You cannot argue your way out of a repossession by rapping louder into a ring light. Now follow me carefully, because this is the part most creators are going to miss. The blacklisting was not the story. The blacklisting was the smoke. The fire was underneath the whole time, and Curtis Jackson lit it 7 years ago. At 2:30 in the afternoon Eastern, an entertainment reporter published a bombshell that stopped the entire industry mid-step. Leaked communications between a high-ranking executive at a major distribution conglomerate and Curtis Jackson's legal team revealed the actual mechanism of the takedown. Curtis Jackson's investment group, a quiet vehicle registered through a chain of corporate shells stretching from Delaware to Wyoming to the Cayman Islands, had, over the last several years, been quietly acquiring the distressed debt portfolios of a former distribution partner that Maybach Music Group signed with in the early 2010s. In the kindest reading of the documents, Curtis Jackson bought the debt as a passive institutional investment. In the harshest reading, and this is the reading the leaked emails clearly support, Curtis Jackson bought the debt for one reason and one reason only: to position himself as Rick Ross' legal creditor. Not his rival. His creditor. That word matters more than any word in this entire story. A rival can be out-rapped. A rival can be out-toured. A rival can be out-promoted. A creditor can only be paid. This is where the ground cracks open. Because if you are Curtis Jackson's investment group and you hold active liens on Rick Ross' original distribution obligations, then every dollar Rick Ross' new album generates, every streaming royalty, every touring settlement, every catalog sync placement, every t-shirt sold at the merch table at the back of the arena is legally subject to garnishment the instant it hits Maybach Music's accounting pipeline. Read that again slower. Rick Ross was not just losing money on this album cycle. Rick Ross was making money for Curtis Jackson on this album cycle. Every stream, every playlist ad, every arena seat, every ringtone downloaded in a country Ross has never toured in. Every penny. The check was not routing back to the promised land estate. The check was crossing town to G-Unit's finance office. Curtis Jackson knew it before he sent the first letter. That is the exact reason he sent the first letter. He was not trying to bury the album. He was trying to inflate the garnishment. He wanted every dollar to arrive stamped with his name on it. That is the sentence that turns a beef into a business model. Curtis Jackson posted the punctuation mark himself. A short clip. Private jet. Champagne flute. Laughing so hard he had to wipe the corner of his eye. I own you, Ricky. I own you. Every time somebody plays a song off that flop, the check comes to me. Thank you for the 2,000 sales. I'll take my cut on Friday. The internet did what the internet always does. It converted tragedy into memes inside 11 minutes flat. Rick Ross photoshopped into a G-Unit polo, name tag reading Employee of the Month. Rick Ross clocking in at a G-Unit office with a punch card. Rick Ross Wingstop uniform edited into a G-Unit uniform down to the visor. A Dr. W2 with Curtis Jackson's signature scrawled at the bottom in cursive. The biggest boss brand, a brand Ross spent 20 years engineering, protecting, and monetizing, was pulverized in a single news cycle. Here is the terrifying part. The pulverization was not the pain. The pulverization was the anesthesia. The actual pain, the real financial injury, is that Rick Ross now has to choose between performing the album and not performing the album, and both choices are losses. Perform it, and Curtis Jackson collects. Cancel it, and the venue overhead and tour bond costs eat him from the inside out. This is what Checkmate looks like inside a modern corporate boardroom. There is no move that is not the wrong move. Every square Rick Ross can step on is a square Curtis Jackson already bought. Every direction he faces, there is a lean. Every step forward is a garnishment. Every step backward is a default. This is the geometry of a corporate execution, and Curtis Jackson drew the map with his own hand. You want to know how a Maybach music strategist described the situation privately? He said it out loud on the phone with a business affairs lawyer at 3 in the afternoon, and it leaked to the press inside the hour. He said, and I am quoting directly from the notes I have been shown, "We are not fighting a beef anymore. We are fighting a hostile takeover, and we brought a diss track to a debt collection." That line is going to end up in a Wharton Business School case study one day. And somewhere in the back